Scary telling.
I always knew that Sir Balthazar, my 7-year-old Maine Coon, loved exploring the woods behind our house. He would go out on his journeys and come back with souvenirs for me: chipmunks, squirrels, and even pine cones. He was a gentle soul, but had no problem holding his own and defending himself against animals much larger than himself. I had seen him scare off a bear once, so I never worried about him. But one day, he disappeared for longer than usual. I wasn't too concerned, knowing that he could take care of himself. However, after a few days had gone by, I started to wonder where he could have gone. It wasn't like him to be gone for so long. Just as I was going to head out and search for him, I heard his familiar battle cry. I opened the back door and stood in shock. A little girl was with him. She was covered in dirt and muck, and her striking blue eyes stood out even more. I asked her where she lived, where her parents were, but she just stared at me with blank eyes. It was clear that she had been through something traumatic. I knew I had to help her, so I brought her inside. She was clearly hungry, so I asked her if she wanted to eat. She barely nodded, and I led her to the kitchen. While I made something for her to eat, I watched her clean herself up. I gave her one of my t-shirts to wear, and as she sat down to eat, I contacted the police in the next town over. I called out to Sir Balthazar, but he was already gone. Usually, he relaxes and sleeps for a few days before going on another excursion, but I guess he had more pressing matters to attend to. As the little girl ate, I noticed that every bit of skin that wasn't covered by the oversized t-shirt had bruises in various stages. I asked her what happened and if she wanted to talk about it, but she just stared at me with blank eyes. I didn't want to upset her any further, so I let her eat in peace. After she finished eating, I led her to the living room, where I set up a makeshift bed for her. She was clearly exhausted, and it wasn't long before she fell asleep. I sat there for a while, watching her sleep, wondering where she had come from and what had happened to her. It was clear that she was lost and in need of help, so I decided to take care of her until we could find out where she came from. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of person could do this to a little girl. And where was Sir Balthazar? I had a feeling that there was more to this story than I knew. As the days passed, I started to notice some worrying signs in the little girl's behavior. She seemed increasingly withdrawn and agitated, as if she was constantly on edge. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thrashing about in her makeshift bed. I tried my best to comfort her, but she wouldn't say anything about what was bothering her. I also noticed the bruises on her skin were not just a few little marks. They were deep, and they covered much of her arms and legs. I was worried, but I didn't know what to do. The little girl wouldn't tell me what happened, and I didn't want to make her relive any trauma she may have been through. It was clear that the little girl was still traumatized from whatever had happened to her before she came to me. I could only imagine the horrors she had gone through in the woods before Sir Balthazar found her. I couldn't help but feel responsible for her, and I wanted to do everything in my power to help her. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard her screaming again. I got up and rushed to her, trying to calm her down. She was thrashing about and sweating profusely. I noticed the bruises on her legs were looking worse, and some of them were starting to turn black. I decided to take her to the hospital the next day. I couldn't just sit there and watch her suffer in silence. I hoped that the doctors would be able to help her, but I was also worried that she might be taken away from me if they found out that I had taken her in without proper authorization. The next day, I took her to the hospital, and we waited for hours in the emergency room. Finally, we were called in, and a doctor examined her. They took some blood tests and x-rays, and they confirmed my worst fears. The little girl had suffered physical abuse, and they could see the signs of old injuries that had healed. The doctor said that she would need to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation. I agreed, hoping that they could help her in any way possible. I felt so helpless and guilty for not being able to protect her. As I sat in the hospital room with her, I couldn't help but wonder who could do this to a little girl. Who could be so cruel and inhumane? I thought about Sir Balthazar and the man with the blue eyes, wondering if they could be related to what happened to the little girl. That night, as I slept in the chair next to her bed, I had a terrible nightmare. I dreamed of a man with piercing blue eyes, standing in the shadows, watching us. In the dream, I tried to reach out to him, but he just laughed and walked away. I woke up in a cold sweat, wondering if my imagination was getting the best of me, or if there was something more sinister at play. The next day, after spending a few days in the hospital, the little girl was released. The doctors gave me instructions on how to take care of her and how to spot any signs of further abuse. I was relieved to have her back in my care, but I was also worried. I knew that someone had hurt her, and I didn't want to let it go unpunished. As we settled back into our routine, I couldn't help but keep an eye out for any signs of danger. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard Sir Balthazar growling and hissing in a way I had never heard before. I quickly got up and went to the back door to see what was going on. To my surprise, I saw a man standing in the shadows of the woods. He had piercing blue eyes and a sinister smile on his face. My heart racing, I tried to open the door, but it was stuck. I watched as Sir Balthazar lunged at the man, but he quickly pulled out a knife and waved it at him. I was frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. The man started to walk away, and as he did, I saw the back of his shirt. It had a symbol on it, a circle with a triangle inside. It was a symbol that I had seen before, but I couldn't place where. After the man was gone, I went back to the little girl's room to check on her. She was fast asleep, but I couldn't help but worry about her safety. Who was that man, and why was he here? Was he the one who hurt her? The next day, I decided to do some investigating. I went back to the woods to try and find any clues as to who this man could be. I searched for hours but found nothing. As I was about to give up, I saw a piece of cloth caught on a branch. It was a shirt, and on the back was the same symbol that I had seen the night before. I took the shirt to the police, hoping that they could help me find out who this man was. They told me that the symbol was related to a local gang that was known for its violent tendencies. They promised to keep an eye out for any members of the gang in the area. I felt a sense of relief knowing that the police were looking into it, but I still felt scared. I knew that this gang was dangerous and that they wouldn't hesitate to hurt me or the little girl if they found out that we were onto them. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the image of the man's piercing blue eyes from my mind. I knew that I had to protect the little girl and myself from whatever was coming our way. But how could I do that when I didn't even know who or what I was up against? The days passed, and I continued to look over my shoulder, worried that the man with the blue eyes and his gang would come after us. I spent most of my time at home with the little girl, making sure that she was safe and secure. She was still traumatized and wasn't talking much, but I could see a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She seemed to trust me, and I wanted to do everything I could to make her feel safe. But one day, everything changed. Sir Balthazar didn't come home. I waited and waited, but he never showed up. I searched the woods and the surrounding areas, but he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. I felt a sense of dread as the days passed, and Sir Balthazar was still missing. I couldn't imagine life without him. He was my constant companion, and he had always been there for me. I couldn't bear the thought of him being hurt or worse. One morning, I received a call from the police. They had found Sir Balthazar's body in the woods. He had been attacked and killed, likely by the man with the blue eyes and his gang. I was devastated. Sir Balthazar had been my protector, and now he was gone. I didn't know what to do. I grieved for Sir Balthazar, but I also felt guilty. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have gotten involved in whatever was going on. I felt like I had failed him, and I couldn't forgive myself. But I knew that I had to keep going. The little girl still needed me, and I couldn't let her down. I contacted the police again, hoping that they could find out more about the man with the blue eyes and his gang. They promised to do everything they could, but they didn't have any leads. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to care for the little girl, all the while worrying about what was going to happen to us. The man with the blue eyes was still out there, and I didn't know if he was going to come after us next. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a knock on the door. I hesitated, but eventually, I got up and answered it. It was the police. They told me that they had received a tip about the man with the blue eyes and that they had caught him. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Finally, we were going to get some answers. I went with the police to the station, and they showed me a picture of the man they had caught. It was him, the man with the blue eyes. They told me that he had been involved in a string of crimes in the area, including the physical abuse of children. I was horrified, and I couldn't believe that someone could be so cruel and inhumane. The man was charged and put in jail, but the little girl's fate was still uncertain. I didn't know if she was going to be taken away from me, but I hoped that she wouldn't be. I had grown attached to her, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her too. As I sat in the police station, waiting for news, I couldn't help but think about Sir Balthazar. He had given his life to protect us, and I knew that I would never forget his sacrifice. He had been a true hero, and I would always be grateful for the time we had spent together. After the man with the blue eyes was caught and put in jail, things slowly started to return to normal. The little girl was still in my care, and I was grateful that I didn't have to say goodbye to her. I continued to take care of her, and she slowly started to open up to me. She would talk about her past, about her family, and about the things that she loved. As time went on, I could see her bruises start to fade, and she started to smile more often. She would play with her toys and spend time outside with me, and it felt like she was finally able to be a child again. But even though things were better, I couldn't shake the memory of Sir Balthazar's sacrifice. He had given his life to protect us, and I knew that I would never forget him. One day, I decided to take the little girl to the woods to visit Sir Balthazar's grave. We sat there for a while, just remembering him and all of the good times we had spent together. It felt like a fitting tribute to a true hero. As we walked back to the house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. We had been through so much, and now we were moving forward. I knew that the little girl would always have a special place in my heart, and that Sir Balthazar would always be remembered as a brave and loyal friend. In the end, I realized that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. I had learned that no matter how difficult things may seem, there is always a way to move forward. I had found strength and courage in the face of adversity, and I had discovered that love and compassion can conquer even the most heinous of crimes. And so, I continued to take care of the little girl, grateful for the second chance we had been given. I knew that there would be challenges along the way, but I also knew that we could face them together, with the memory of Sir Balthazar guiding us along the way.